our second passage, again, we have been in Acts. We're following Paul in our series that are called Called To. We were called to be apostles. If we look back on our canvases, we were called to follow Christ. We were called to go, and then we were called to suffer, and now we are called to love. And that is our lesson today. And we are finding ourselves in the second missionary journey of Paul. And he will be with Paul, and Silas and Timothy are together. And Paul will find himself a little bit separated as he gets to Athens. So this comes from Acts 17, verses 22 through 31. Let us listen to God speak, and I will let you know that I'm using the Message version to have us experience it a little bit differently. So Paul took his stand in the open space and laid it out for them. It is plain to see that you Athenians take your religion seriously. When I arrived here the other day, I was fascinated with all the shrines that I came across. And then I found one inscribed, "To the God nobody knows." I'm here to introduce you to this God so you can worship intelligently and to know who you are dealing with. The God who made the world and everything in it, this master of sky and land, doesn't live in custom-made shrines or need the human race to run errands for him, as if he couldn't take care of himself. He makes the creatures. The creatures don't make him. Starting from scratch, he made the entire human race and made the earth hospitable, with plenty of time and space for living so we could seek after God and not just grope around in the dark, but actually find God. God doesn't play hide and seek with us. God is not remote. God is near. We live and move in God and can't get away from him. One of your poets said it well, "We're the God created." Well, if we are the God created, it doesn't make a lot of sense to think we could hire a sculptor to chisel a God out of stone for us, does it? God overlooks it as long as you don't know any better. But that time is past. The unknown is now known, and he's calling for a radical life change. He has set a day when the entire human race will be judged and everything will be set right. And he has already appointed the judge, confirming him by raising him up from the dead. The word of our Lord, thanks be to God. Well, there is many, many reasons that I love Halloween. Chiefly because it's my birthday. I cannot deny that. I, though, loved that Halloween came this week. It was like a moment of grace to allow us to catch our breath, if you will. It was like pure joy in the midst of such sorrow that we have felt in our community. It was a return, even just for a blip, a moment of normalcy in a week of abject perversion. It was a break, a much-needed one, from the heaviness, even if for just a few hours. Kids dressed up in their Halloween garbs, moms and dads, maybe you were like me, who rushed out of office to get to your kids' Halloween parade, only for them to shyly, embarrassingly wave to you. And as I said on Facebook, you bet I told her to turn around so I can get a picture of that Halloween outfit. Neighbors turned on lights and readied themselves for a constant stream of knocks. Some neighbors who really got into it, I won't mention any names in our congregation, even turned their houses, their garages into haunted houses for sheer delight or terror maybe for those yearly visitors. Trick-or-treaters bounced carelessly, and safely in the night even, with greetings and thank yous for their pursuit of goodies. And if you got to count yourself as one of the lucky ones of us in the church parking lot, you got to witness this whole grand affair. You got to delight in the ghosts and goblins and the princesses and the superheroes and share in collective community, neighbor to neighbor, treat bags and hot cocoa and coffee, greetings and conversation, even a place to get out of the rain that came. And lastly, we must not forget our dear teachers who had to contend with all the bottled up excitement of the day and the candy hangover the next. Oh, you dear blessed ones. I'm so glad to see a friend in the congregation today because her sister posted this wonderful thing on Facebook. And her sister is a Presbyterian pastor. I'm not going to out her too much. And she did something provocative. It was really thought-provoking to me. It came to me later on in the week as I was thinking about my sermon and how she encouraged us to be Halloween Christians. She pondered this while reflecting on something she read a few years back, contrasting Halloween with Christmas, especially Santa Claus, who's now ubiquitously everywhere the days after Halloween. Santa Claus is one who keeps lists, right, boys and girls? What are the lists that Santa Claus keeps? Gabby? Naughty and nice. If we were theologians, it sounds a lot like works righteousness. As a mother, it's what I get through Christmas season saying. If you are not good, you know Santa Claus is watching, right? Halloween, though, she said, is grace upon grace. And I want us to think about that for a moment. Think about the grace that comes on Halloween. Homes are opened to strangers on Halloween. Even more astounding in our days of fear and anxiety. Neighbors greet neighbors. They get out. They say hello. All receive. Nothing is earned. Generosity is shared abundantly. Gifts are exchanged without expectation of anything in return. It is grace upon grace. My sister told me about my 4-year-old niece's experience this Halloween. You know, she's my twin sister, so it's kind of weird that you got to say, happy birthday, and then she comes back and says, happy birthday. It's kind of delightful. And I asked her, well, how was Halloween? Because when you're 4, Halloween is absolutely the best time of your life. She's in the prime of her Halloweens. I am now realizing my children are getting to almost past Halloween prime. We didn't even trick or treat together. That's okay. My sister says that she managed about an hour of trick or treating, which sounds about par for a 4-year-old, doesn't it? And when they got back home, my sister discovered that the bowl that she placed out was already out of candy. And they had not turned the light off, you know, that signal that says, pass on by. And so they heard a knock at the door. And my niece Emma grabs her candy stash bag and dumps it into the bowl, opens up the door, and offers her own Halloween candy for the trick-or-treaters. Oh, isn't that wonderful? Grace upon grace. The strange passage from Acts 17 is likely one of my favorites. Paul and Silas and Timothy are in the midst of their second great adventure of their mission work. And as par for the course, the gospel message gets these missionaries in trouble once more. Paul, though, gets to escape to Athens where we find him. And there he finds that Athens is filled with temples and shrines and monuments for the plethora of Greek and Roman gods. But among them, he finds a space with the title, Unknown God. I wonder, maybe Paul did, if that was their effort to cover all their bases, just to be sure. Paul uses this, though, as a launching pad, a place of connection, a place to bridge what separates them to bring them together. Paul, when he comes to Athens, doesn't criticize them. He doesn't chastise their ways. Instead, he loves them. And by loving them first, he can find the opening to let them in and for them to let him in. This unknown God, Paul shares, this is a God who spoke creation into being. This is a God who gives us life and breath and our very being. This is a God that is not far from us, and in fact is a God who has come near to us. This is the God who does life-changing things, like raising the life-changing one up from the grave. This characteristic to love without exception will also compel Paul to write that famous passage of love that Cameron read to the church in Corinth. Somewhere along the way, the people, the Corinthians, have forgotten about the ethic that comes with following Jesus, and that is fundamentally that we ought to love one another. Instead, they have allowed infighting to happen. Instead, they have allowed themselves to withhold generosity instead of sharing it. They have allowed the same kind of social, societal separations to also exist among them. In essence, they have neglected to love one another. Love is patient, Paul says. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. He says it bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. Some of you might have been able to go last night to the prayer visual. That was love in action. I'm still digesting all that happened in that service together. I'm still ruminating on the words that my friend Rabbi Paul brought in his homily to our gathering last night. Particularly his admonition to see the face of God in one another and to build bridges. In his homily, he told a story, the story of Esau and Jacob, to get at the scene, in the other's face, the face of God. He talks about how, if you know this story, how Jacob tricks his brother and his father so that he might have the inheritance. He's the second son, not the oldest. And when they come back together after years of separation, they have brought their armies of men and their people and their livestock, and Jacob is waiting for it, waiting for the strike. And instead what happens is that Esau reaches out, embraces him, and says, "When I see you, brother, it is like seeing the face of God." Next, Rabbi Paul told a story about bridge builders in Peru who must work together to construct and reconstruct the bridge that connects their communities that are separated by a giant chasm. The people have to work grass into ropes, and those ropes are used to make the bridge, to mend it and repair it and to build it, because being separated from each other is not an option. They desire their connection, even if it requires them to work at it over and over and over again. Martin Luther King once said that hate is too heavy of a burden to bear. Love lightens the load. Love, though, takes work and requires us to work at it. My friend was right this week when she admonished us on Facebook to be Halloween Christians, because we are invited to live into that grace upon grace, love upon love. Because when we do, we turn the light on to dispel the darkness. We get to open the doors to our homes and to our hearts. We get to greet one another and to share our treats. We get to behold each other. And when we do, we get to see the face of God in one another. We get to extend our arms and make a bridge that bridges the chasm between us and the other, between each other, between neighbor to neighbor.